And a big warm welcome to our ship's counsellor, David Smith. Welcome to Ceti Alpha 5.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, you have elected to be marooned on Ceti Alpha 5. It's an M-class planet in the Ceti Alpha region. Now, I have to warn you, it's only just classified as an M-class planet. So it's kind of rough, lots of storms, not exactly the best of weather, not exactly your usual desert island paradise. But you've decided to go there, and with you, you're allowed to take 8 episodes of Star Trek, as it was broadcast. That can be movies or episodes, 1 luxury item, and 1 book. And that's going to have to do you for your entire stay, which is forevermore. So, tell me, Counsellor, how are you going to get on?
I think I'll struggle, as anybody who knows me will tell you that if you see me with a screwdriver, you take it off my hands very quickly. So I think I'll find a cave somewhere and just work my way through the special gift that I'll be allowed to take later on.
All right, okay. Well, I think there's a few cave networks, so you're not fancy building any tree houses or tents or anything then?
Oh, if I do, I might shorten my stay on the Alpha Ceti, that's for sure. It's more risky than anything else.
So we're going to go for the ready-made shelter then, are we?
Oh, I think so.
Okay. Now, before we start, there's all of your choices for 8 TV episodes to watch. They're all going to be Star Trek based. So tell me a bit about how you got into Star Trek in the first place.
I remember Star Trek the first time round. I'm old enough to remember the original series as it was first broadcast. It set off in me a love of science because all the science of the original series is just so good. And when it came to primary school, all that stuff stuck in my head. And I ended up with my first school nickname as Prof, because I just knew stuff. It was my misfortune that the next series that came along was Lost in Space. And the character there was Zachary Smith. And I got Zach in early secondary school, but I prefer Prof.
Yeah.
But I've loved science ever since.
Okay. Did you study science at all?
Almost. I wanted to be a chemistry teacher when I was at school. And I almost achieved that because I got enough hires, but they weren't of a good enough grade. And even speaking of hires dates me. But university wasn't an option at that stage. When I was on an archaeological dig, the person in charge said I was too clever to be a labourer, which was nice in a kind of a way. But she set me up with an interview with the College of Technology in Dundee in Bell Street, and I had a couple of chances of taking it forward with a view of getting in science the back door at St Andrews. That was my aim at the time.
Wow.
But it didn't quite work that way. Because in the interim, I ended up working as a furniture remover. And then, because of my church connections, I ended up heading towards ministry. And St Andrews said yes. Edinburgh said yes. And that left me with a choice. Because I could have stayed at home at St Andrews and golfed myself silly, but never passed an exam in my life. So I had to give up St Andrews and went to Edinburgh. Aberdeen gave me 2 days notice for an interview. Glasgow said no, but that didn't bother me. It was a good choice to go to Edinburgh because not long after I got there, I met somebody in a church there who is now my wife of 31 years.
Oh, wow.
So it was a good choice.
Yeah, that was a good path to take then in the end.
It was theology rather than science, strangely.
Yeah.
I got the teacher bit right, maybe.
Yeah, definitely teaching, and there's so in the ministry. Right. Okay, so you remember Star Trek the first time. So do you actually remember watching the pilot as it broadcast? Then I take it.
Yeah. When the details are getting kind of vague now with the passage of time. Yeah. But I look back on it now and watch things like The Cage and things like that, and then having been to a couple of Trek conventions now. Hearing the likes of Denise Crosby talk about her experience in The Next Generation and how she never got to keep her comm badge, well, I thought it was appalling. I gave her an Alba one, by the way, when I was at the trip one, and invited her to have a look at it and remember the Alba fondly. But it's just looking back on these things and realizing that the Spock character started off quite loud and shouty, just like Worf did. He was quite loud and shouty to begin with.
Yeah.
But as things progressed on and the characters bedded in, they became much more normal, if I can put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how to talk about involvements and yeah.
Did you have a particular favourite then from any of the series really? That you've seen them all now.
My favourite episode is my number 8 choice.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of what they did in the original series, so that they weren't afraid about tackling big subjects. I mean, there's the episode, I think, Plato's Children, where they talk about that was the first interracial kiss.
Yes.
And it was all about mind control and about having to do what everybody told you to do. And then you have Shatner's position of this kiss is happening, in spite of what everybody else was saying, even crossing his eyes for all the other takes, to make sure there was only one take available, which I kind of like. But it's things like that Star Trek does, that gets you thinking when it's not being stupid. But we can come to that a bit later if you want.
Yeah, I mean, they've tackled some pretty big issues. Certainly, I remember the early episode, "Let This Be Your Last Battlefield," which we've had on Ceti Alpha 5 already. Yes, they were great to go to those places. Yep,
you did. And there was the episode, I forget the name of it, where you have two guys, one black on one side.
That's the one.
Yep. Yeah, that's the one. And the fact that they have to continue fighting in the space in between two realities, they just can't let go, and that's hard.
Yeah, and quite timely as well with all the stuff that's going on at the moment in the modern world.
Yep. There's a lot of it that keeps the themes keep recurring in different ways. I mean, the racism thing for one, and then you've got that episode as another one. And you've got the strange episode with the cones and the I forget the other side. It's America and Russia, communists and.
Oh yes, I think that's Armageddon or something like that, isn't it? It's the war's being done by computers.
No, I don't think it's that one, because they end up bringing in the American flag, and Kirk starts speaking the sacred words about freedom. And they try and say "we the people," but they've gone so far from it they can't say it properly. And he then says that "we the people," and reels off the first few bits of the Constitution of the United States. And it's all about peace and fraternity and working together, which is typical Star Trek, of course.
Yeah. That was Gene Roddenberry's dream, wasn't it? Yeah. It was. Yeah. One we'll get there. Right. So tell me about you've got 8 episodes, all movies, entirely your choice. So what's going to be your first one then?
The first one, to get it out of the way, is The Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh.
I love it. I mean, I've heard on previous Maroonings that the Tribbles, Trials and Tribulations is one that's chosen because of the cleverness that they get the new things into the old. But there was enough story in the original to make it both challenging and fun. And there were funny moments with Kirk sitting down on a Tribble and it squeaking annoyingly. And McCoy saying that they're born pregnant. I mean, goodness me, what a life. And I have a Tribble that will squeak at me. And I've got a little packet of them that are in different uniforms.
Oh, brilliant.
Hiding away.
They have you haven't fed them any grain, so they won't multiply them.
No, they are locked away in a plastic container.
Safest way.
Yeah, I try and keep them isolated as much as possible.
Yeah.
Although the big one's kind of close to the 5 little ones.
Ooh, danger. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's quite a light-hearted version, then, isn't it? It's quite a little bit of fun for Star Trek.
There is. there is fun. There is fun there, but it's covering over a serious story. It's the grain that's been sabotaged, and it's how that's found out. And you've got the counter-espionage thing going on between the different nations, and the way that it is found out and solved thanks to the mass death of a few tribbles.
Yes. Yeah, because they make a different noise, don't they, for the Klingons?
Well, they do, yes. And I'm told that was sold by Shatner, because he made it do what it did. And it was his hand gesture that made the thing bounce up and down. It was brilliant.
Fantastic. Yeah. So the tribbles make good pets then, would you say?
Would they make good pets? Yes, they would, but that's the trouble, that they do make good pets. You don't want them. When the fun about the trials and tribulations is that Worf's terrified of them.
Yes, I think they're too cute. How could you be scared of them? They're so sweet.
Yeah. Well, you have Uhura stroking one very lovingly at several points in that episode, and they're dangerous, but cute can be dangerous.
Yes, worm their way into your heart before you know it. Your house is full of them.
Oh, what?
So, what's your next choice then? You move on to the next generation, I believe, is the next choice.
I did. I went with The Offspring, and it's the one where Data creates life. He has a daughter, Lal, and I have to confess, it made me cry. It was some episode because it's the way that Data fights so hard to keep Lal alive, and he fails. And there is a deep sadness there. I think at the end of the episode, he touches his head and saying she's up there because he had to download the memories. But when I got Brent Spiner's autograph at the last trek at Birmingham, he went, "Oh, isn't that cute, the pair?" And then he said that was the first one that Frakes directed, the first episode that Frakes directed. And he's gone on to better things since. Well, some would argue it's maybe not better than Trek, but that was his first go, and it was a very powerful episode. Yeah, with Data fighting hard to save life, and life as he knew it, not as anybody else did.
And quite an interesting conversation, with Picard as well about his permission to actually create a daughter, which, it's an interesting thought, really, because anyone else within the crew would be, just fine.
Yeah, it was a good dialogue, and again, it's taking that big issue with the creation of more artificial life. And there were other episodes that tackled that, where I think is it The Measure of the Man, where Data's on trial for his very existence.
Yeah.
Whether he's a being.
Do you think there was a definition of life then in general? I mean, would Data count as being alive, or?
Well, that was the big argument. And it's a bit like it's possibly the heading to the book that I would want, but the definition of what an AI is and what an AI can and cannot do. And Data goes beyond that in so many ways.
Yeah, interesting, eh? And then I believe we're sticking with the next generation for the next choice then.
Yeah, Night Terrors is the episode I quite like. It's the one where they end up stuck and they all have lack of sleep. And in lockdown, goodness me, we're all having that issue of lack of sleep because of the stress of it all. And it's the way that everybody is affected, even Picard. And that's the thing that was interesting for me, that normally the captain is above that kind of nonsense. They are serene and in total control. But there's a bit in the episode, I think, where he's in the turbo lift and he's suddenly aware in his mind that the roof of the turbo lift is coming down and he's going to get squashed. And he's looking up, he's like that, he's terrified, and then the doors open and everybody's looking around and saying, "And what's your problem?" And it's the humanity of it, that everybody gets affected by the whole thing.
Yeah, and sleep deprivation is pretty cruel. So do you have any tips for dealing with the lockdown loconess of sleep deprivation? Oh.
I'm not saying that that's everybody's solution, but a wee toddy of an evening can sometimes help.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be careful that it's just occasionally. It's not
Yeah.
a total addiction thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
now and again, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah. How have you been finding life in lockdown so far, though? You're quite a social person, really, aren't you? And
Well, I am because of what I do. And the thing that's really frustrated me, that all the things that have energized me, the school chaplaincy and the like, and worship, has gone. And I've ended up binge watching just about anything I can lay my hands on. So when I've gone through Deep Space Nine, I've gone through Enterprise, I've gone through a lot of Next Gen again, and I'm trying not to get to wanting to go to Picard. That I've got one or two thoughts about that. There's a couple of episodes in Picard that are really very powerful, but there's the Kurtzman factor for a lot of that really kind of, well, you know the kind of thing I'm talking about, I guess. And we're maybe not wanting to talk about that right now.
fair enough. I'm sure we'll get to that, though, won't we? Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, but Night Terrors. So how did that one start again? I can't remember how they came to.
I think they came close to an anomaly, and another ship was fixed there, and they had to try and find something to go through. And they eventually managed to find it. I think through Troy. She ends up having a little vision thing that enables them to go through. They have to send something to the other side. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. All right. And then we're off to Voyager.
Yes. Slightly controversial choice. Endgame. It's the last 2 episodes of the series. I know that there were issues with the writers with this because they had to try and get it finished before all the strikes and things were going on. It's all kind of twee in a sense, but I like the way it ended, because the whole of Voyager is about the journey home. They even have an episode, I think, called The Journey Home. And it's the way they come out from inside the Borg sphere at the end and just burst forth. And they're home, and everybody's happy, and they get an escort back to Earth, which is astonishing. It's an episode that is good for all kinds of reasons for me. I had a funeral in my second charge where I didn't know this woman, and it turns out she was a Trekker.
Oh.
And she asked for Voyager theme, the Voyager theme, to be played as an exit piece for her. And the son said, "If you enjoy Trek, you'll know why." And I said, "It's because she's going home."
Oh.
And he said, "Absolutely right," because that was her going home. And that piece of music is short, brief, but it sends its own message. And even when I've used Enterprise, the words and lyrics of that are powerful, but you never listen to that at the beginning of anything because you want to get into the episode. But as the message of Voyager was going home, Enterprise it's all about, it's a long road, but we're getting there.
Yes.
And even in the darkest times, we're getting there, and that's important.
Yeah, and I love that the whole faith at the heart. You know, we'll get there. Yep. Yeah.
That's a big tick for me for obvious reasons.
Yeah. It's a beautiful theme tune, that one. Yeah, but I personally thought that of all of the series endings, because obviously the original series kind of ended quite abruptly, so we maybe ignore Turnabout. Yeah. But of all the other endings for them, they all kind of reached fruition. Which one do you think would Endgame be the best, or is there another one?
Best ending? Oh gosh. The Next Generation ending was quite good. All good things come to ... And there is a niceness about that, but to have Picard dotting about like that was a bit confusing. Endgame, you had a flow of the story, and you could argue the toss about whether the script was a great one or not, and most people don't think it was that good. But it did pick up, it allowed a resolution mean, the last thing that should have happened was they're still stuck there in the Delta Quadrant. That would not have worked. That really would not have worked. But the Enterprise, that was a bit contrived, perhaps, because they ran out of impulse. Is that the right word to use?
Possibly, yeah. They were kind of cut short in their prime, really, weren't the Enterprise?
Yeah, there was space for more development of things, because they started killing off characters by way of bringing things to a close. And that wasn't necessary, really. I mean, the thing that the Next Generation did was killing off one of their characters, the Denise Crosby character, put everybody on edge, because nobody had done that before. That when Worf gets badly injured, you think, well, is Worf going to be in a wheelchair or the equivalent? And of course, he doesn't. But because one character's gone, there's always that thought then that maybe somebody else is going to go. And of course, what they did in Deep Space Nine, of course, is another thing again.
Yeah, that one was right on a cliffhanger, wasn't it? Like, where's he gone? Where's he gone?
Yeah.
So I think Endgame probably wrapped everything up rather neatly, didn't it? That was quite good.
It did, and I think that's possibly why people were, or some people were critical of it, that it was too neat. That you have a little time conundrum that they conveniently use with Janeway, and is it convenient? Yes, but it brings a resolution that was needed.
Yeah. And I liked it because that was always the mission, and they rounded it off, and it ended. It's rather than just keep going in the Delta Quadrant. So I'm totally with you on that one. Thumbs up from me. I loved it.
Thank you.
And I was glad they all got home safely.
Yes, because the journey home's completed.
Yeah. And then it's another Voyager one. Yes, for your next choice.
Yes, my next one is Scorpion Part 2. I think in my notes I said to you, 7 of 9. Enough said. Enough said.
Well, tell me, what was it about 7 of 9 that appeals to you then?
Well, what's not to like? To have somebody as lovely as that, for one thing, but her story develops as it goes through, and you discover that Annika has had a tough time. Nobody has a great time being assimilated by the Borg, but she gets the chance of redemption. And she takes it, and it's a struggle as her character develops. I mean, her relationship with the EMH is quite fun, and he takes her under the wing, and she ends up, I think, with Chakotay towards the end, and that's never quite resolved. So that, although I think in Picard that goes off on a strange tangent, but I had the good fortune to meet the actress at Trek, and Andrew, who is not one to say very much, especially in stardom terms. She had seen her in other things. I mean, she was in The Librarians and one or two other things, Warehouse 13. And she just turned around and said to her, "I think you're awesome." And she turned around and looked Andrew straight in the eye. I'm looking at her, and there's a tear in her eye, because she's not, I guess she's not used to people just blurting that out. But the fact that she was moved by that made Andrew very chuffed. And it was just a moment of moments at a Trek convention for me. And I do have that signature.
Wow. That's a beautiful moment, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. She's quite a fascinating character, yeah. So, any other moments from conventions that are special like that then?
Well, the one I mentioned already with Denise, because I just jumped the queue and just handed her the Alba badge. I was hoping that she might come back at me with something, because I left a message on her Facebook page, which was one amongst millions, I'm sure. But I took a risk and offered her a place on the Alba team. She hasn't responded to that yet, but that's up there. I had a double signature from William Shatner. One was for a teaching colleague who I just said to him, "I'm going. If I can get a Shatner signature, would you like it?" And his face just hit the floor. or his chin at least, and managed to get it. And I sent it across. He moved across to Glasgow to another school. And he sent me a very effusive letter saying how wonderful it was for a colleague to do something so nice as that. And I've been in the habit of trying to do that if I can, just to make somebody's moment. My treasurer, who's just retiring here, is into all the space stuff. He was fascinated with the early space missions, the Gemini project and what have you. When I said I could get Fred Hayes' autograph, he said, yes, please. And I did, and the look on his face when he saw this, I could have named the number and he would have given it to me. And I said, I don't want to know. And he said, give me a number so that I can give it to the church, which he did. So I've been trying to pick up these things, and probably one of the better moments was simply going to Birmingham with Andrew. He was my conscience for my time there, to make sure I didn't overspend, which was
really
it was very likely. And having gone a couple of times, he understands my fandom with it. And just hearing the music as you enter the arena, it's wonderful. It throws me right back to the 60s, just listening to the original theme and the way they developed it over the years. It's just wonderful. So the whole experience, and of course, dare I say, meeting up with the Alba crew and getting the group photograph.
That's very special.
Were you there, Sarah, when we got the group photograph with Max?
No, unfortunately I couldn't go to destination, no.
Yeah, that was a moment, because he had a queue as long as anybody, and he stopped the queue to come and get a photograph.
That's fantastic.
And he said another just in case. And there was about 7 or 8 photographs taken so that people can get a choice. It was an astonishing thing.
Yeah. That's lovely. They're so involved, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I hear stories of other folks having great experiences with the crew. I think there was one that appeared because somebody asked, I think, on the Trek page, and they were asking for experiences, and one person had a problem with a disabled child, and Alexander Siddig overheard the conversation. And he said the hotel they were staying in, that they were completely out of order, that they should go and use my room and to let this happen. And he stood up for this woman quite rightly, because she was going to get shoveled off into some toilet somewhere that did not have baby changing facilities.
Oh no.
And so he stepped in and dealt with it. They're a good bunch of folk.
Lovely chap. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the reason they were obviously picked for Star Trek.
It's possibly not the only reason, but it helps.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah, definitely some kind of family there. So your next selection, it looks like we're on to a different genre. So we're at DS9.
Yeah. It was really hard to try and narrow down just to 8. I mean, I think that was the whole idea, to make it difficult.
Yep.
And I thought, well, I'll try and pick one from everyone if I can. And I didn't, but I ended up with one from Deep Space Nine, and it was the Tears of the Prophets. Because in that bit of the series, Worf has transferred from the Enterprise to Deep Space Nine, and he has a series of short-lived relationships, but there's always something a bit special with Jadzia. And they finally get together. And she is stunning in that red dress as they get married. It was a stunning moment. But given that you know that there's an episode called Tears of the Prophets, and then, of course, she gets killed, it's the, how do you say, the humanity of a Klingon. Because they would be black affronted at the very thought. But there's something wonderful about seeing that side of Worf, because he has to deal with that grief as only a Klingon can. And when he yells at the stars with his hurt and his pain, it does bring a tear to the eye. And then he has to deal with that in the next 2 or 3 episodes to make sure she gets into Sto-vo-kor, because that's his thing. And then, of course, there's the issue with the next Dax, which is a problem for him.
It's not often that you get a reincarnation, effectively a reincarnation of your
Yeah,
wife. That's
yeah,
the usual situation.
yeah. It's a difficult one for him because he has to sort of be there but not be there, and it
Mm,
takes a few episodes for him to deal with it, but also for the new Dax to be able to handle him
mm,
and to be confident within herself.
mhm.
She ends up taking the Dax symbiont by accident. She
That's
just
it.
happened to be the one that's there.
Yeah, just the new. Yeah, 'cause normally there's this huge years-long process, isn't it,
Yeah,
to get matched? Yeah.
yeah. And she didn't have that,
Mm,
but she gets there. She gets there.
yeah. I quite enjoyed her character actually. She was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite quirky, and a lot of the time in that last series is spent developing her,
Mm,
uh, and maybe that wasn't fair because it puts a lot of pressure on the actress,
mm,
but she comes through it okay.
yeah. Big shoes to fill, actually, didn't she? As well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That was an interesting one, but yeah, that's an interesting. That's quite a tearjerker of an episode. That's quite a.
it is. I mean, when she didn't do
Heartbreaking.
so bad, the actress, because she ended up marrying Spock's son, so that was okay.
Yeah. They make a lovely couple, don't they?
Yeah, they're good because I think the last one she ended up mentioning the fact that she'd married Spock's son,
Mm-hmm.
so she was quite happy with that herself. And I mean, she's a good actress herself. Well, a great actress is Terry, and it was interesting seeing just how the character changed with the different actress because different height, different everything.
Yes, completely different. Yeah,
Mm.
completely, yeah. And like they did change the characters. She withheld the memories of the Daxes of the previous, but yeah, but also paved her own way, which is quite good. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm, okay. And then I have to say, this is the granddaddy of Trek. Your next choice. This
Well,
definitely this is
I
amazing.
can't not include the Wrath of Khan. For all kinds of reasons. I mean, they managed to get an original actor from the original series, Ricardo Montalban, to reprise his role as a much embittered individual. And it's the way he is tasked by Kirk to chase him. And he does. And the bit that gets me is in the Mutara Nebula at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about Spock, because that's the thing on itself in this film, but where he knows he's been defeated, but just before I get to that, it's the bit where Spock turns to Kirk and says, "You realise that he's thinking in 2 dimensions,"
Mm.
and so the Enterprise goes down, and the bit where you've got Khan's ship coming along, all fizzing away, damaged, and then you get the Enterprise coming up behind them in the nebula with the swell of the music, and you're thinking, "Yes, get him!" And then it's the line from Hell's Heart, "I stab at thee." It's Moby Dick, and it's wonderful at that bit, and then of course you have the Spock moment and the cringeworthy moment of a Canadian playing the bagpipes, Amazing Grace. But what other tune are you going to play? And it was okay. That bit.
No,
It paved the way for something else.
yes, it did. We don't lose him for very long, which is a good thing because it was quite a tearjerker.
Yeah, but he ends up directing himself, I think, because I think he directed the third one.
He did, yeah, and 4 as well. I think 5 was Shatner. He
Yeah,
did.
that was the daft one.
Yeah, it didn't quite
Yeah,
work out that one, did it?
looking for God. I
Yeah,
think really.
yeah, he was a bit different, but yeah, the Calm was clearly just all about revenge, and I'm quite interested actually. How would you, if Calm was to kind of turn up and ask you for advice, what would you kind of, what would you say to him? Do you think?
Oh, if I was to help Khan,
Mm.
ooh, that's an interesting conundrum. That one. If I was to help Khan, probably the best way is to lay a trap for Kirk is to have somebody who is a woman, because Kirk just never lets a woman go anywhere. You're talking about the honey trap of honey traps. I mean, that's the easiest way to get Kirk, because he can't keep his hands off women, and neither can his clothes keep on. I mean, how he manages to get through that wardrobe, I don't know. They should shoot the tailor. You should go to Garrick, and that would sort him out.
It's not Kirk's unless he's ripped something, is it, really?
Yeah. I mean, every time he gets in a fight, it's a ripped shirt, or it's usually about a woman.
Yeah. But to be fair, though, Khan had quite a bit of ripped armour as well, didn't he? He didn't exactly keep his clothes on very well.
Well, this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
A bit more decorum, please. But then it wouldn't be what it is.
No, it surely wouldn't be, no. So interesting to know as well, because a lot of people watch that and they often feel that kind of that burning that Khan has. Have you ever felt anything like that? That kind of like just will go to the ends of the universe for this?
I haven't perhaps felt that kind of hatred, but I have in my youth. I had a moment where I just lost my temper totally. And somebody had really aggravated me and to the point of throwing a stone at me, which caused pain, and I was going to get them, and it was the elder brother who was literally holding me back, and it was somebody had discovered that there was a bit of a rammy going on outside their house, and we were invited to calm down, only perhaps not in those words, and that broke the moment. But I have had over the years a very bad temper. And keeping that under control is not quite Spock-like, but just putting it to one side at times, because sometimes words that are said in hatred and hate cause all kinds of issues, and I don't want to go down that road again, ever.
Very wise.
Especially with the dog collar on it. Although sometimes that can be frustrating, because there are some things I'd love to say, but I can't.
Oh dear.
I would love to be quite honest and frank with people, but ministers aren't supposed to say that kind of thing, are they?
So what's your top tip then for breathing and count to 10? Or
well, I just there was a little thing that appeared on one of the ministers' Facebook pages offering an alternative, because as a minister you'll not be surprised me talking about Jesus a bit, but there's a bit at Easter when he goes in the temple and he turfs over the tables. And I'm thinking, yeah, other alternatives are available to ministers, but we don't talk about that. I can turf over a table or three. So it's there. But it has to be what you might call righteous anger rather than anger for the sake of it. And I think in Khan's case, he had been left on that planet for long enough that he hated Kirk anyway. And the thought of all his crew now gone just fueled that anger even more to the point of obsession. And that's what you're seeing with Khan. It's obsession gone wrong. Can obsession be a good thing? I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, it's certainly led him to a bad place, hasn't it, really?
It did. And to feel that you're being tasked by somebody, challenged to seek them out wherever they are, and to even in that last moment from hell's heart I stab at thee, and it's pressing the button for the self-destruct, and you're thinking, now we've got to get out of here, and that's when you've got Spock's sacrifice that enables the crew to escape, and then you've got the entire next film to make up for all that, and it's quite a wee moment.
And earlier on is I forget the name of his sidekick, Joquin, I think his name is, isn't it? We've got Genesis, we've got a ship, we can go anywhere we want to. Why do you want to chase after this guy?
Yeah.
You can have anything you want. It's all here. World's your oyster, but you're hell bent on getting revenge.
Well, even the galaxy was his oyster, but he was just so obsessed. It's the Ahab thing. And he just could not let go, and sometimes the best thing to do is to let go.
But not easy, is it?
It isn't. I mean, in my first church, I had a really hard experience in my last year there, to the point where I was borderline heading for a breakdown. It was as serious as that. And years later, lo and behold, we have an exchange in the presbytery where I am, and one of the churches on offer was my first church, and this is 20 years after the event. And would I go if I had the opportunity? And I said, look, find me an alternative at the moment because I'm not ready. Even after all that time, it would have been too easy for me to go in guns blazing and have that moment of calm. And I thought, no, I'm better just leaving it for a while. I can go back now and deal with it, but not then.
Interesting. And talking of that, your last choice here for the 8th episode is back to the original series, and very much religion based, really, isn't it?
It is. It's bread and circuses. It's my go-to episode, really. I actually sat watching this as a student when I was in Edinburgh University. A whole bunch of folks who were nuts about Star Trek sat and watched this episode. I'm sitting beside a guy who's a Southern Baptist pastor. He knows what's coming. And he's got sort of hands in the air at the end and all the rest of it, and praise God and all the rest. All the others are going, oh, come on, oh, get real. But the thing about the whole episode was that, as you'll remember, I'm sure, that it's a planet identical to Earth where Rome began but never fell. And you've got televised gladiatorial fights, complete with knobs and for boos and whistles and cheers and all the rest of it, which was the thing of the time in the 60s. But it's asking the bigger question, which for Roddenberry was quite remarkable. He did pick up a couple of parables and ran with it in the original series too, but he was asking the question about this peace group on the planet who were worshipping the sun. But Uhura says, it's the Son of God they're worshipping. And it asked the question, if Jesus had gone to another planet, would he have done the same thing? And that's the big question. And Nimoy and Shatner, both practicing Jews, were asking the same question of themselves. Wouldn't it be great to go and see that? And that's a fascinating thing. And the reverberations of all of that, having read about the story of how the films were made, and both Shatner's recollection and I think Uhura's recollection, Nichelle Nichols, they were aware that there were no chaplains allowed on site for the films. No chaplains. Which was Roddenberry's direct order. And given that, Nimoy and Shatner went off and prayed together in complete defiance of what Roddenberry was saying, which is interesting. It's just such a pity that they had a falling out towards the end of Nimoy's life. And it would appear, reading between the lines in the books, I think it's all sprang from something that Shatner had said to Nichelle Nichols about turning up for something she was organising. And he'd mentioned something about the fee for appearing. And that really set her off, and it set Nimoy off as well. And that was the kind of thing that broke their friendship. Now, I might be wrong about that, but just reading between what seems to be there. But it asked the religious question about the bigger questions. And it's something that Trek just does. It asks those kind of questions.
Yeah, I think the thing I find interesting about that one is that they always seem to find some kind of system, some belief system always emerges, doesn't it? No matter what civilization, there's always something. It's almost kind of like it doesn't just happen. Yeah, it's.
And there's a story as to how these things sort of fall into place. And it's the old story of the evil wins when good people do nothing. And with the Roman thing, it's the captain of the ship they're searching for that ends up as the one in charge of stuff, but he ends up being killed because he finally sees the light, almost literally, and they escape.
Quite lucky, yeah. It's also quite an interesting one because it's a kind of a almost alternative history one, isn't it? It's kind of like if we just imagine that we tweaked this in history. There is a TV show that you might know, the Man in the High Castle, I think it's called, which kind of
yes. I've heard of it, but I haven't been able to access it yet.
Yeah,
but it does ask those kind of questions. I think in an earlier incarnation of this program, you were asking Ailey the same kind of question. But what if history had been slightly different? What if the Jacobites had kept going from Derby?
Yeah.
They would have won. They would have won because everything was in disarray. Equally, if Hitler had gone across the Channel, he would have won because Britain wasn't ready. But they would have had a hell of a fight in their hands with the fighting on the beaches and all the rest of it. But there are moments where things just stop. And you wonder what if. And that's kind of what Roddenberry did with this episode. What if? I mean, this kind of thing is typical of Trek because I think it's Insurrection, the film, is where that you've got one lot on the planet who haven't aged. They've got their Eden, as it were, and another lot are attacking them, wanting them to get rid of them, and they've got the same genetic background.
Yes.
Because one lot have just gone and aged, and they've got all this surgery, and had they stayed, they would have been fine.
And I think that was quite interesting as well because the lot that had left, they kind of were bored with this. We're going to go out here, and the others just stayed, and they were kind of happy with this. They didn't embrace technology. They just lived with the land and carried on, as it were. And the others kind of came back to try and exploit it, really, didn't they? As they were wanting to.
Well, they did. There's obviously something that was there on the planet that they wanted, and it's the greed thing. Whatever you've got, I want. And that's a recurring theme because you've always got somebody who wants what the other person has. And if we had a bit more of the contentment that was existing on the planet, maybe this planet of ours might be a slightly better place.
Yeah. But how do you think we find contentment then? There's always this feeling that the grass is greener or there's something better. And
there is a sense of that amongst some of them, but I think there's a bit at the end of the film where one of the people who are coming realizes that the people they're now talking to is a direct relative. And there's a healing moment where he is sorry for what has happened, and there's a reconciliation goes on. So that there's redemption is possible almost anywhere.
Yeah.
And you see that too with Spock's mission of unification, of trying to get the Romulans and the Vulcans back together. It doesn't work, but it's not because he hasn't tried, and that's the worst thing, is not trying. The thing that surprises me is that there are people out there who are wanting to make a connection with some kind of faith. Maybe don't know why, but they need to have something that they can, or someone that they can talk to. And sometimes that's just chatting with a church member. Sometimes that's a faith thing.
It's interesting. There seems to be a draw in everyone for something, whether it's a divine being or whether it's a pantheism, but everybody's always looking for something beyond, aren't they?
Yeah, I would call it a kind of a God space. There's a seeking after something beyond ourselves. There's a natural curiosity in humanity where we want to just explore that a little bit and let's go see. Sometimes it gets into a whole heap of trouble, which the archer finds out regularly. But equally, there are moments where that you suddenly find you've got friends out there who were enemies before. And the only way that happens is by reaching out and saying, well, hello, we're here. Putting our foot in it many times, but redemption's always there.
Yeah. And how do you think you would get on then if we had first contact then? So would we?
Well, right now,
yeah.
I think we would be up the creek without a paddle. But not asking the Vulcans, please, can we come with you?
Talking of your survival on Ceti Alpha 5, though, so you've got plenty of entertainment to keep you happy. So you'll be watching your you've got 7 episodes and a movie. So that'll keep you going. But you're entitled to take a luxury item and a book. So your luxury item is?
My luxury item is a cask of Scapa single malt whiskey. There's no point in taking a bottle. That's just a waste of time. And I figured that with my inability to be practical about building things, at least I can self-euthanize and have some fun doing it while watching all the Trek. And it's my malt of choice. I mean, there's not such a thing as a bad malt whiskey, just a good one and a better one. That just happens to be mine. I was introduced to it at a celebration of a church golf game, believe it or not. I'm part of the Church of Scotland golf team, and we have an annual match against the Church of England. And we managed to win quite convincingly when we played them at Dunbar. And the hotelier had a lock-in for us where he kept producing stuff. Scapa was one, he said, you've got to put a bit of water in it because it was a cask strength job. And I fell in love with it straight away. Sweet, heather honey, wonderful. I mean, everybody knows where Highland Park is. Orkney. Scapa's next door. Literally next door. And it's the only time we've had a surcharge on the bar bill for the Church of Scotland game. We celebrated long into the night, and we knew it was time to go to bed about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And one of our number asked for a bandrui instead of a drambuie. we had a good win, to say the least. And it's always good banter, and we can share ideas with colleagues south of the border. It's a good thing. The trophy's important, though.
I'm sure it is, yeah. You kind of reminded me of the Deep Space Nine episode, the Take Me Out to the Ball Game.
Yes, yeah. But it's the fact that they scored a run. That was the important thing. And it was, it had to happen. It was the Ferengi that managed to do it. And it was good. It was good. I ended up getting the luxury of bringing the trophy home from England one year. There's a lot of talk about the border right now. And as I crossed the border, I will admit to saying to the trophy, welcome home.
Fantastic.
It was originally a match between the Free Church and the Church of Scotland, and it fell into abeyance after the First World War because there was nobody and then the churches united in 1929, so there was nobody to play against. So somebody had the idea of taking on the English, and I know of no trophy worldwide that has 3 different churches on it. It's quite a unique thing. Sadly, the Church of England have won it once or twice. We've got to keep them coming back, you see.
Is it in this country or is it in England at the moment then?
It's currently, I think, in England. They managed to beat us at Ladybank last year, which was hard. They beat us down at Gillen as well, or Gillen if you're from that neck of the woods. So they've won. They have won in Scotland a few times. The first time I played in the game, it was down at Little Aston, which is in Birmingham, but it's the posh bit. We had directions to turn right at the Porsche garage. There was a spanking new Mercedes there that wasn't good enough to be on the parking lot. All these other fast cars. And we end up in this little place, and one of our group managed to contrive to win the last 5 holes to get a draw, which meant that we retained the trophy. Because the English their concern was when were they going to have with the meal. They didn't think for a minute that the Scots would actually hang on to it, but we did.
Yeah, that's good. That's quite nice. I don't know any. It's still quite flat down in Birmingham, isn't it? I thought it was golf.
Yeah, that particular course was relatively flat. Yeah, it was a championship course in its own way. But we've played all over the place. We've played near Bristol, Sheffield. We've played on Dartmoor, and it's an unusual place there because they only cut the greens and the tees. They can't cut anything else because it's a national park. And you've got the Dartmoor ponies. And I took my camera with me, and every time I had the camera in my hand, the ponies ran away. Every time I was on the tee swinging the ball, they were out behind me looking at me. They knew. There was sheep. There was a couple of Ayrshire cows, and at one point I spotted a thistle, and I just turned to everybody and said, "A thistle. We're going to win tomorrow," and we did.
Well done. Yeah. So what's been your favourite course then?
That's hard. I've had the luxury of playing some cracking places. I mean, Muirfield is one of them, and Gillen is another. And we've played across in the West Coast as well. We played Ladybank, which is one of the top courses in Scotland. But I do like playing the English ones, I have to say. They have things that we Scots don't know how to handle. They're called trees. Because a lot of our courses are links ones, you see, and that's where I grew up, of course, at St Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to host it there, but the cost of that is astronomical.
Yeah.
I need a few strips of latinum for that one.
Oh dear. Right. Maybe one day.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your luxury. So Scapa, your luxury item. So how long do you think it'll take you to get through that? A cask is how many gallons?
Oh, there's a few. I should have researched that to be absolutely sure, but there's several bottles in there, and it's just a case of taking it and enjoying it. And if there's a couple of bad days with the weather, the local anaesthetic comes into play, and you could get yourself quietly relaxed and just sleep through the difficult bits. Not a lot in terms of value for energy, but that depends.
Yeah.
I could become quite frenetic after several of them, but moderation.
It's interesting anaesthetic. If it helps you to sleep, you'll be more energized when you wake up. So there's a logic there.
There is that, and there is always the hope of rescue.
Well, unfortunately not. No, sorry, no rescue coming.
Oh well. In that case, I'll be well pickled to be put in the ground when I'm found.
So what are you when you're not watching Star Trek? What are you going to be reading then?
Well, reading. When I started watching Star Trek originally, I started to get into science fiction, and I read quite a few things then. So a lot of stuff I simply didn't understand because we're just too young, and it's probably into the book choice really. If you can get me a compendium of Isaac Asimov, I would be quite happy reading through anything of his.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Asimov that came up with the 3 rules for AI. I think it was him, and some of the iRobot kind of thing, and that kind of storyline, because he knows how to tell a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff around just now is it's like a holodeck movie. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to go down the black and white kind of series, and I don't want to go down the detective novels. A bit of serious plots are good, and that's probably my criticism of some of the modern stuff from Trek, that there's not enough emphasis on good writing. There are people that could argue the toss with me on that, but it's as if the people that are making these things are saying, look at what we can do with special effects. Isn't it wonderful? And it is. But the stories are naff. They just don't work. Or when they do, they don't follow the storylines to their conclusions. There was an episode in Picard, I think, that was really a study of grief, when Picard is with Riker and Troy, and they've lost a child. Yeah. And it's the undercurrent for the whole episode, and it's brilliantly played. It's very powerfully played, but it's just left alone. And that's a shame, because that could have been developed a bit.
Yeah. So you've got a book, you've got a luxury item, you've got 8 episodes, and you're going to find yourself a nice cave.
Mm-hmm.
No windows, unfortunately, in the cave.
Well, I can come to the door.
Yeah.
I did an Enneagram thing, and they reckoned I was a hermit, so that would be all right for me. Even hermits come out to the door sometimes.
Yeah.
And I would be quite happy to share a glass.
Yeah. Excellent. You won't need any sun cream, obviously, if you're going to be in the cave. That's all good. So that's
no. Well, the sun's. I take a tan reasonably easily, so that's okay.
All right.
I could maybe find a stick and practice my golf swing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you create a whole new game.
Well, yeah. Well, they've played golf on the moon, so it's just have to work out the logistics and work out the gravity and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I see that could be. Yeah, the ball might not quite go where you think. Yeah.
Well, that's normal. The ball never goes where I think.
Game, maybe. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Some very interesting factoids as well, and I think some brilliant choices.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just remains for me to say, enjoy your evening, sir.
Thank you. I certainly will. And the next time we meet, I'll share a glass with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And also with you. Live long.
Thank you.